Final case is Delores Jean Eggert. Very important serial killer related case that a lot fewer of the public really know about it. She ended up bludgeoning the family as far as his Bob Devore's wife, which was her mother, so on, bludgeoned her to death and then burned all the bodies as well as apparently the house that everything was in. So, very important case. There's a lot that can certainly be learned and taken away from this Delores Jean Eggert case, but it's lesser known in the community. So make sure you get it out there, spread the word, like and subscribe, but get these videos out far and wide. And stay tuned for more updates. Thank you. And the last case I'm going to be covering here is a very important case. None other than Delores Jean Eggert. This is a recent case, and I felt would be very, very important given modern things that have been going on in the world today. And there's certainly much more than could be said about this situation and others. In fact, there was another case I wish to put up, but I'm not going to do that for right now. This case, though, is very, very important to know and recognize kind of the signs of what goes on. She was basically one of the most infamous serial killers in Arkansas, apparently. Delores Jean Eggert was accused of beating her mother, Bob Devor, and then what she did after is shot her and burned the body in a rural backyard area of Washington County in 2007 in the state of Arkansas. And defense attorneys on Thursday, they say that they filed a motion with the court asking Circuit Judge William Story to declare Monica Batista, a state witness, as an accomplice. So she had at least one accomplice. And that's interesting with all the different things we've seen with certain dangerous people, dangerous women who ended up turning into killers, is they would keep an accomplice with them. And the story is often very, very similar in each one of these cases that come up. The uncle did some horrible things. The aunt wasn't there for the daughter, and at some point she just ended up snapping or something along the way. But she did these crimes as an adult, and it's really horrific when you think about it. Taking the body out back and then burning the actual whole area. It's just awful. Very graphic, but very necessary, because there's a lot that we can learn from these particular cases. It says, if you can believe the statement Monica Batista made to the jury and to the court, then she's an accomplice, is what Buckley said at the trial. Batista has not been charged with any crime in connection with the disappearance or death of Devore. However, it's clear she was involved. The motion argues that there is clear and convincing evidence Batista was an accomplice and must, as a matter of law, be declared as one. Chief Deputy Prosecutor Matt Durrett said he has not seen the motion and declined to comment at the time. So there were several motions brought up about this fact that she flipped out. I mean, she's alone. She has a lot going against her. She has an uncle that wanted to enable her crimes because of horrific things he did, which is a whole other story. That goes back into what occurs in childhood trauma and similar things like that. But we know, and we know especially from what's been going on in the world today, that these type of activities, and also the music, the type of music that they would have, that they would be listening to all the time, and similar things, this is what enables people like Delores Jean Eggert to commit these terrible crimes. And in a way, we all have a lot that we can learn and take away from these situations and really see kind of the full extent of what goes on when these situations crop up and when they arise. They testified a lot about the evidence, and the evidence here was just overwhelming in this particular case. A third motion filed Thursday seeks independent examination and testing of 2 dental crowns recovered from the Devore farm. Prosecutors, according to the motion, plan to have a forensic dentist, Dr. Kevin Dugan, testify that the crowns compare favorably and are consistent with crowns taken from Devore. So in other words, they could even see from the teeth that she was burned, literally burned alive and similar. And at this hearing, they displayed some of the graphic details of what truly happened. But Delores Jean Eggert, she got, as a result, after the trial in late 2009, she basically got life. She's not ever getting out. But it was just very, very interesting and very worth the study. And to see some of the things that led up to this and why Delores Eggert took this action. She had the accomplice that was kind of a thief or someone who was able to ransack the house. And she got tired of always playing, I don't know what you want to call that, second fiddle. So she was definitely a little more deranged than a Dylan Klebold or any of these younger type of serial killers. She had some much more clear-cut motives. She wanted to get all the cash that was in the family farm. She had her reasons for being able to take the family out of the picture. She didn't want her parents to be around anymore. She had a lot of other very deep-seated doubts and problems with the people that were running kind of her conservatory fund and similar things, and she was just basically out to take everything, take all the insurance policies, everything. And so this is a very important case to kind of bridge the gap a little bit, look back. It's not that long ago, 2007, and be able to examine what we can really learn from this case. So we're going to be doing that, and I will also be covering a little bit of that podcast. They did kind of a podcast on this case, and it's very, very enlightening. Shows you the motives of the people who didn't like that family as well. They kind of cut her off, and she's still very, very much a psychopath, and she doesn't have an excuse for doing these things. But at the same time, you can see some of the actions that precipitated all these kinds of ongoing conflicts and how they kind of cut Delores out of the deal, or they wanted to make sure she was not recognized in the town, things like that. And apparently she just had a very, very negative relationship with her family. I'm not sure why the uncle and why the father also later enabled her to do certain things, but they were aware that she was after the insurance money. So I found a lot of this very interesting, and it's going to be a good case to be able to cover for just a bit. We're not going to cover it for that long, but a lot of people need to know about this, so I appreciate you getting the word out there. Spread it out there far and wide. There's not as many people who have run across this case either, of Delores Jean Eggert. And she was convicted in Arkansas, and one of the most prolific, worst killers in the history of Arkansas. So definitely an important case. Thank you for this update. And it says a Washington County farmer whose wife was beaten, shot, and burned has been convicted of hindering the investigation into her own killing. In this case, a jury found Bob Devore guilty and recommended a 10-year prison term. Now, what he had done, folks, is he staged part of the crime scene. When you go back and you really learn about this, he staged part of the crime scene. to make it seem like something else happened, and it's quite terrible, but it deserves, to really be reviewed for people to learn quite a bit more about it. There's a lot you can take away from this case too, for sure. But according to the Northwest Arkansas Times, Delores Jean Eggert and Monica Batista beat and shot her 70-year-old mother, Pauline Devore, in their home and burned her body on the family farm. So Bob Devore is accused of staging the crime scene and lying to conceal the evidence, but also having a relationship with his stepdaughter, which wasn't unheard of, but was quite a shock in the community in Arkansas at the time. So they did have a relationship, and she was looking for the insurance money, for the insurance policies. And so that really preceded Bob to do certain things that he did, and then it enabled a lot of this crime to take place. And really, when you look back on it and you start studying it as a history lesson, Bob Devore deserved the same exact sentence, no question, that Jean Eggert received, because he was a part of what happened. He really precipitated what happened, and he was very obsessive about who Pauline Devore would talk to. There's a whole podcast about what was really going on there. And it's fascinating. There's a lot that can really be said about that. Continue to spread real awareness about this case. Thank you again. Pauline Devore was age 70 when she disappeared from her farm. Her husband, Bob Devore, returned home from a business trip on June 15, 2007 to find the house burglarized and his wife missing. Several $1,000s in bank bags and 14 guns. 14 different guns were among the items Bob Devore reported missing that night. Bob Devore was arrested Monday on a preliminary charge of hindering apprehension or prosecution. Authorities say he staged the crime scene, lied to mislead investigators, and concealed evidence, giving Eggert access to cash and Pauline Devore's vehicle, assisting her to flee. Bob Devore made statements to a witness for the state within days of the murder of his wife, acknowledging his prior knowledge of the murder and cover-up of the crime, that it was committed to aid Delores Eggert to avoid arrest. Bob Devore had a extramarital relationship with Eggert, his stepdaughter, which started in 2005, according to the report. And they go over this in the podcast. It's really worth listening to that when you get a chance to be able to truly understand and recognize certain things that were going on here. The podcast is a must. Durrett said he does not anticipate other arrests. Authorities found what appeared to be bullet holes in a wall inside the Devore home and residence, but were not able to get evidence of Miss Devore's death until an informant came forward. Monica Batista, who was an accomplice to the murder, told police in 2009 that she helped Eggert plan the execution at the home and then kill Devore and burn all of her body. Batista is not being charged with the crime, but authorities are using it in the prosecution. Authorities are going to use the information they found and they believe to be, and what they believe to be, minimum human remains, including charred bones and a couple of dental crowns, on the Devore family farm near Washington County, Arkansas. The crowns compare and are consistent with the crowns known to be in Pauline Devore's mouth, according to the court record. No other remains were found. So you can imagine the shock, the real shock it was for them to come across this scene. According to court documents, police had at least 4 people who were recording all the phone calls and conversations between Eggert and the other accomplice. Eggert told one woman who was wearing the wire that she threw some of the remains in the river. Calls Eggert made from the local jail were recorded, and letters she sent from jail were seized. Prosecutors were not seeking the death penalty in Eggert's case because there weren't other victims. If there were other victims, it would have been, definitely. And this was very gruesome. And tragic, Just, it's another tragic story of a family in Arkansas which had this sort of thing occur. But, that's the lesson for us all. Family is not infallible. And if you have a real, I'm not saying that this is very common, but if you have a real troubled family and live in certain places like Arkansas, well, you've got to expect that occasionally things are going to turn out like this. Like there's just some people that are really, they're not able to deal with the issues that come up in the same way that other people would be able to deal with them, and they're going to go off the rails. And I believe that is definitely a case of this occurring again in Arkansas, because they had spoken about what Delores Eggert had done before. There's a lot of interesting podcasts on this topic, and so we will be revisiting it. It happened on a 720-acre ranch. Just amazing. And to see that Bob Devor, was really a part of this is equally interesting and worthy of the investigation. So thank you. Be sure to get this to a much wider audience. We want to get crimes like this out there more, see if more can be discovered. And as always, stay tuned for more great cases coming up. Thank you.